I crossed $100 million in net worth at age 31. I'm 35, significantly higher than that now. And I have the privilege of talking to lots of people who are at $1 billion plus. And so in this video, I want to break down a handful of themes that I've seen repeated that can make you significantly more successful. The rich buy time, the poor buy stuff, ambitious people buy skills, and lazy people buy distractions. As much as these seem like four different groups, it's really like you have these pairings. Rich people use money to buy time. Ambitious people use time to buy skills. And the reason it's ambitious people is because generational wealth isn't transferred through assets. It's not transferred through stuff. It's transferred through education. It's transferred through skills. And so there's this Sanskrit proverb that I love. If you have a good son, you don't need to accumulate wealth. If you have a bad son, there's no point in accumulating wealth. And so the idea that you're going to pass on your wealth to a child who doesn't have the skills makes it irrelevant, because fundamentally either it is a good son who has skills, and then if the son has skills, then whether you transfer the wealth or not makes the wealth itself irrelevant. And I find that there's so many things that are like this in wealth creation that you don't understand until you're on the other side of it, because the answers that you're looking for are not in your newsfeed. They are not in the distraction. And so the vast majority of lazy people that I've encountered continue to distract themselves because the difficulty of looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, I am inadequate, is too painful. And so instead, they would rather watch fluff videos on the internet that make them feel good and tickle their ears rather than confront reality, that they are just not good enough. And so they consume the stuff that's like, I am worthy, I deserve these things. In other words, entitled to them, which, by the way, if you feel entitled to something, then when you get it, you are never grateful because you thought you deserved it to begin with. We know that gratitude, for example, is something that increases your subjective well-being in life, which is that you enjoy life more when you are grateful for what you get, which means that you have to, by very definition, expect nothing, which means you're entitled to nothing, which means that you deserve nothing. In reality, you are worthy only of the things that you currently have because you have already gotten them. You have proven that you can work a minimum wage job, so you are worthy of the compensation of minimum wage. And as much as this is painful, and I'm sure this will get clipped 100 times to show me as some evil rich guy, I'm willing to take that hate for the few people who will hear this message and decide to change the way they act. You can be ambitious and distracted, which keeps you poor. When I started out at my peak, I had 9 businesses because I heard 7 income streams make you wealthy, but it doesn't. 7 income streams just spread you 7 ways. And I had 9. I was like, well, 7, good. 9 must be better. To give you context, I had a chiropractor agency, I had a dental agency, I had a gym turnaround business, and then I had, at the time, 6 locations. So there's 9, where it is, boom. And I had partners in each of these businesses. I was still the one who was required to rainmake, meaning I was the one who was required to sell customers into all 9. If you are required to work inside of the business, then you can only really do one job. And so when people hear that someone has 7 income streams, it's because they own assets that generate that kind of income. But in order to gain the cash to then buy the assets that create the cash flow, it requires time and focus. Let me make focus real for you. Focus is a very amorphous term. Focus is measured by the amount of things you say no to. And inversely, you could measure it by how few things you say yes to. Meaning, the most focused person says only yes to one thing and says no to literally everything else. And so the next thing that separates the rich from the poor is it's 100x, not 2x. And so this concept is one that I had dinner with a friend of mine who's a public CEO, and I asked him what he had done to grow the business. I think from a $200 million market cap to a $1.2 billion market cap in less than 2 years. All right, so that's absurd growth for a company. And I was like, so, what are you doing primarily? And he said, I'm shaking hands, I'm kissing babies, I'm going to events all the time. And I was like, well, how many? And he's like, well, I'm going to do 66 events this quarter. And I was like, in person? He was like, yeah. I was like, they coming to you? And he's like, no, I'm going to them. I want to make this real. He has a wife, he has kids. And before anyone listens and says, I can't believe well, cool, he makes trades. If anything, I would hope that people watch this and say, I wouldn't make that trade. In which case, great. Also, don't complain about not having what somebody who has made that trade made. And so one of the big misconceptions, by the way, this is a sales thing too, is that people want your outcome their way. They want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to say, hey, I want to not change the way I'm eating. I want to not change the way I'm living, but I want to have a 6-pack and I want to be in shape. I want to continue to live this way and I want to get the 10 chick or the 10 guy. I want to continue with my work-life schedule as I currently have, but I want to have hyper growth. They are trades, they're price tags. When you go to the store, you either want the shoes and you're willing to pay the price or you're not willing to pay the price. That's it. You can't pick the price for the shoes. You pay it or you don't. My telephone back to myself is that I thought I worked a lot when I was younger. And I did spend a lot of time working, but I made so little progress because a lot of that time I wasn't actually creating output. I encourage people to do something called the 12 by 30. All right, so it's very simple, and it's actually not as unsustainable as people would think. You work 12 hours a day for 30 days straight, no weekends. By the last day, you realize, 1, you aren't made of glass. 2, how much more you could be working. 3, how much faster you could be achieving your goals. 4, how much you could be getting better every single day. 5, you don't need to work like this forever. But if you need to do it for a season or for a reason sometime in the future, you've got that gear in you. And 6, there are people who are working more than you who are beating you. And you get all of those lessons for the low price of getting more done in a month than you probably did last quarter. And so everyone, and like, of course, you've got one side of people who are like, I work more than this now. And of course they don't. They obviously don't. And the thing is that people are like, well, I work like that, but I take a couple of days off. Right. That's the point, is that you have to push through it. Now, can you work 16 by 30? Sure. If you want to, you're welcome to work more than that. Because I've found that working 6 to 6 is kind of like what I do every day anyways. I'm on 12 by 100, in terms of how I think about working. And there's plenty of days that I work 15, 16-hour days because I get here at 5 or 6, and then sometimes we have an event, sometimes we have dinner, things like that afterwards, and it ends at 9. And that's where you have to be on, not just at the office, not just in front of your computer, but people actually demanding things of you on a regular basis all the time, being on camera. And I'll tell you that there are levels to this. Like, working alone for a full day is not as exhausting as being on stage for a full day, being on camera for a full day, because every second that you are not peak, you are losing. You can take a break while you're working alone. You can't take a break when you're on stage, when you're meeting customers, when you're making content, right? Like every minute that is not recorded is basically a minute wasted. There's a whole team here behind this camera, right, that is making this stuff for you, and I'm costing them every second I'm not showing up. I remember there was a season of my life where I think I had like 9 straight months of this, and it was not 12, it was 15, 16, because I had to wake up at 4 to get to the gym, where I was at the gym, but I would wake up at 4, and then I would get the class ready. I'd open the gym doors at 4:30, would start the classes at 5. And the last class at night would end, it would be a 7 o'clock class, it would end at 8. And then at 8, I would then do billing. I'd reach out to old customers. I would confirm lead appointments for the next day, all that sometimes until 10, 11 at night. And then I'd wake up again at 4. And so I don't know what the hours are there, but it's more than 12. And I did that for 9 months straight. And I used to describe it as the kind of tired a good night's sleep couldn't fix. It was like, it was tired. It was deeper than like one sleep. I needed like weeks to like basically come back to normal. And the thing is that I think it is valuable because you have to learn that you have that gear. I think that gives you supreme confidence when you're entering any new endeavor, because you know that you have acquired the trait of being relentless, that you do not relent, you do not let up, you do not stop until you get what you want. And you know that you can push through being tired or being underslept or being overwhelmed because you realize that you didn't die and that you've done this before. And so the difference between the newbie and the veteran is that the veteran looks on something and looks back on what they have done to get to that point and says, I've seen this before. This is another one of those. And that's why they don't have the anxiety. That's why they don't have the stress. That's why when they get on stage, they crush it. That's when the high pressure situation, they still breathe normally. Their heartbeat doesn't go up because they have done it before. And the only way that you can get to the point where you can say you've done it before is to do it now. And so I define work as volume times leverage. And so it's about how many times you do something and how much you get for each time you do it. In the beginning, you need to do a lot more of this, right? You do way more volume. Because of that volume, you gain skill. And then the leverage also increases. And so you get 100x the volume, which then over time builds skill, which then gives you more for what you put in. And then over time, that continues to increase your output. The thing is this concept of 100x, not 2x, has applied to so many different areas of my life. Like when I paid a large brand for insight into how I could grow my personal brand, when I decided to get into this game, I was like, hey, I'm not growing that fast. And he said, oh, well, pull up your social media profiles. And we pulled them up one by one. And he said, look at what you're doing, look what I'm doing. And he had genuinely been doing 10 times more volume than I was doing. And so he basically said, you're not doing enough volume. I then said, okay, that was clear as day. I need to do more volume. And the thing is when we did more volume, we got better at doing it. And so now we continue to do the same volume as I did in the beginning, which is 10 times more than when I started, but we get even more output. And then I had a different friend who talked to me, billionaire guy. He was thinking about getting into content. And he said, hey, I'm really not growing that fast. And I got to have the exact same conversation with him. But the thing is that this guy had done 100x, not 2x before in his life. It was just that he got to realize, like me, that it has been 100% domain specific. And so when he then I showed him my Instagram and his, I showed him my TikTok and his, I showed him my YouTube and his. And I said, dude, I'm making 450 pieces a week. You're making 7. And he was like, got it. Like understood. He immediately got it because he had already learned that lesson in a different domain. I want to zoom out for a second. Right now is a period of time where I'm working really hard. I'm working a lot. I'll give you context as to what a lot is for me. So this year, the first 100 days of the year, I didn't have a day off. And so my time was only spent working. And so it's like, well, what's the difference between when you were, quote, working all the time when you're younger and working all the time now? Is that what I get done in a day is significantly greater than what I got done. And the quality of that work is also higher. Because the thing is that you learn how to work. You get better at working the more you do it. And so a lot of people are like, man, I feel like I'm not that productive when I work. Like, what should I do? It's like, work more. Like you work more until you get better at working. I remember when I was a legal intern at a company in France called Arkema, if you want to know how they say it. And I was a legal intern and I was spending the whole summer there, which by the way, they always try and like use and abuse interns. I was like, man, I'm working so hard. And I talked to one of these legal partners and I only had one exchange with this particular legal partner who's, high up in the firm. And she said, oh, she was like, that's cute. You don't even know what work is. She said, you don't even know how to work. She's like, you spend time here. She's like, but you don't know how to work. And I just remember how dismissive what she said was, but I understood. I mean, I understand now, especially what she meant. It was like, you're spending a lot of time here, but you're not getting anything done. And it takes time, it takes reps to get better at working itself. And so that measure of focus, the equal opposite of distraction, is just how long you can stick with it. And I can tell you that me, from a very visceral perspective, when I work, there are many times, like, when you work and you're like, man, I feel like I like need a break. The thing is that break period for people who aren't as good at working might be like the rest of the day. And the better and better that I've gotten at working is that I can kind of whip my head back in and be like, confront, like, keep going. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to keep going. And then you kind of realize that there's like a 5-minute, sometimes 15-minute period where like your output slows a little bit, but then you catch the next draft and then you're in again. It's being able to whip yourself back in, and that muscle of doing that takes practice. And the only opportunity that you get to flex that muscle, to practice it, is to work yourself to the point of fatigue, to the point where distraction or respite or rest would be beneficial, or you feel like it's what you crave right now. And then being able to be like, no, I can power through this. And the thing is you can power through it. It just takes practice, and practice takes repetition, and being willing to be uncomfortable for an extended period of time. And it's kind of like when you're eating and you're dieting, there are moments where you get these cravings where you're like, man, I'm starving. I want something sweet. If you've ever dieted before, and this is where repetitions help, it only lasts like 20 minutes. So if you ever do this, by the way, dieting hack is just set a timer when you're like, man, I really want something. Wait 20. And if you still want it, which you rarely do, because it usually lasts less than 20, sometimes it's just 5. It'll just go away. And the same thing happens with focus, but we then just take off for our diet for the day. We order a pizza, right? We order ice cream, right? Or we take off working for the day, right? And we just say, I'm just gonna watch Netflix for the rest of the time, or I'm just gonna go hang out with friends, whatever, or I'm gonna go out. But I will say now that I have worked for 100 days straight, and that was in the earlier part of this year. I think this year I've probably taken 3 or 4 days off since the year started. And I still probably worked until like 2 on those days, but I still consider those like more or less days off. You're not gonna die. And so I think back retroactively, or like historically, like there were people who were forced to work for years on end or they would get killed. As gruesome as that may seem, I see that as hopeful in that they have already demonstrated that it's possible. Like you can work continuously for an extended period of time, because fundamentally you're just alive, you're moving, right? And like you think super ancestors, it's like they didn't have computers, they just were around. And so you do keep busy while you're awake. And so you might as well keep busy continuing to nudge things forward. And I can't tell you the amount of times where now I'm like, my mind checked out and I was like, no, my brain checked out a little bit, but I'm gonna keep going. And then 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours more pass. And I'm like, oh, I actually finished everything that I said I was going to do. And it's just so much more work, and it's fewer days off, and it's earlier mornings and longer nights. And it's being able to do that for an extended period of time. I know the whole idea of like, work on the things you love and you'll never work another day in your life. I just don't think it's true. Like there's so many things that I don't enjoy doing that I have to do. And that's why, at least for me, my saying is always, I will do what is required. How I feel about it is relatively irrelevant, because the things that have come from doing what is required have made doing the requirements something that I know will pay off. And so I kind of like feast on those morsels of past achievements as the fuel to continue doing things that may be uncomfortable or unpleasant in the moment. And most work isn't unpleasant. It's just work. It's like, I have to get this done, right? And you're like, I get to get this done, sure. But like, I'm just being real. For me, it's usually not sunshine and rainbows. Like I work a lot and I'm tired. I slept 9 hours last night, which was the first time I've slept 9 hours in a while, and I feel amazing right now. But sometimes you got to work on 6. Sometimes you got to work on 5. And so think about this hypothetical extreme. Let's say that you played video games. That was all you did. When I say that's all you did, you didn't go out, you didn't talk to people, you didn't see anyone, you didn't eat, you didn't sleep, but you would be incredibly focused. Now, at that point, you say, well, in order for him to play more video games, he needs to sleep. So there are contingencies, right? You do need to eat or you'll die. And so there are the fewest requirements necessary to maintain consistent focus on the one thing. And those things become requisites for focus rather than distraction. Like there are periods of time where you will need to rest. That rest, therefore, is productive because it increases your total output in the one thing that gets you the most leverage, that gets you closest to your goals in the shortest period of time. And so this isn't a video of me saying, work until you die. Well, you will work until you die because we all will die and we all probably will work at some point. But it is more a video of saying that every single thing that is not a requisite for you continuing to do the one thing that won yes are all distractions. They are all things that take away. And people have a hard time with this because they like to say like, you need to have balance. But this is what poor people do not understand. And I am going to do my very best to kind of like pass down a message from the future to my past self about this. And this goes for entrepreneurs specifically, which is you do not understand how much work it is. Like you think you understand how much work it is. And I've had multiple times in my life where I've met someone who was way further ahead than me. And I saw them actually working 5 to 10 times more than me. And I was like, wow. And there's this scene in Invictus, which is a movie with Morgan Freeman and Matt Damon. I love this moment. There's an exchange. I'm paraphrasing, but he says something to the extent of, I've heard that you've been playing with an injury. And Matt Damon just kind of says, well, no one ever plays at 100%. And I just love that because to me, that kind of encompasses the champion mindset, which is that it's not about playing when circumstances are perfect. It's that playing creates perfect circumstances. We have to learn to play when the chips are stacked against us. It's like having values. Values are only valuable when they are tested. You can say you're loyal, but if you're in a hotel room and a girl is there and your wife isn't there and there's no way that she finds out, that is the test of whether you're loyal. It's when there's stakes. The test of whether you have work ethic is whether you can work when you're tired. It's whether you can work when you're distracted. It's whether you can work on things that you don't find pleasant. Because and I see this with, some of the young guys. Like there was a guy we hired and then in 3 days he said, I don't think this is for me. And he got hired to a sales role and he was making outbound calls. I was like, you don't think this is for you? I was like, you don't even know what's for you. You were here for 3 days. You didn't even get the ability to get good at the basic thing. And so there's a level of intolerance for discomfort in some sort of expectation that it's going to be this amazing thing that you're going to love at all times. And it's just not. And so I'm okay being a different voice in the entrepreneur space that's not like, passion is what gets you through the hard times. I don't think so. Passion has not been the thing that has gotten me through my harder times. It has been desire. It has been wanting to make something into a reality by dragging something from your mind into the world. And sometimes I feel like you're giving birth to this thing, which for every mother, which I obviously haven't given birth, it's like you give birth kicking and screaming. It's a painful experience, but then there's life that happens afterwards. And I see work as very much labor. And we even use the same word. It's labor. It's work. It's painful. The pain is that like you're halfway through, I would imagine, and you're like, I still have to keep pushing because it's still not alive yet. It's still not out. And so I think learning to push through that, and this is the part that my friend was saying, where he's like, they don't get it. They don't get it. They think that I do one of these speaking events and they see my Instagram and they think, oh, okay, well, why is my brain not growing like that? He's like, well, I was in 5 different cities this week. And I just had to do FaceTime with my kids in order for them to see me. And people are then like, I wouldn't make that trade. Fine, but don't want what he has. And so let me draw this out for you in a nice little visual to show you how I see work, right? This volume that you need to do. So you have excitement, right? So when you have this new idea, which we have them, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing, right? This is so good. The thing is that once you become neutral and then you become worried and stressed, this is when work begins. And so in the bodybuilding world, they'd be like, okay, once you have achieved failure, that is where your working reps begin. It's an old school bodybuilding saying. I'm sure the science bros will be upset about it, but I think that it very much qualifies for how it relates to work in this world is that your motivation fades very quickly. It's that work begins once motivation stops. And I think if you measure it that way, then you will measure how much you work and how hard you work very differently. So it reminds me of this Muhammad Ali quote where he says, I hated every minute of training, but I would tell myself, suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion. I have this tweet that I said a minute ago that I really like. And so whenever I get to a low point where I think, why do I even bother? I just try and remind myself, this is where most people stop and this is why they don't win. That period, that wall that you hit, like that is the champion wall. That is where you leave everyone else behind because everyone only works until their point of excitement and then they stop. It's like you have to find that next gear. So the next point is that they cannot copy your proof. People want to gain reputations. They want to be known for certain things. They want to get status, but people can copy your promises. They can copy your services. They can copy your logo. They can copy your name, but they can't copy what you've done. I have sometimes younger entrepreneurs who reach out and they're like, hey, I want to build a big brand. And they're like, I want to start making content. But I advise them to only make content if they're truly documenting and don't transition into teacher mode. Because the thing that will build your brand is the stuff you do. Like we look at the business titans that are out there, right? You look at Elon, you look at Bezos, you look at maybe now Sam Altman, you look at Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, and they now have these quote big business brands, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. They are considered probably the leaders of the business world in terms of thought leadership. But did they get there by building personal brands, or did they get there by building personal businesses? And then by building personal businesses, which I'm joking here, they just built big ass businesses. By extension, people wanted to know who was the person behind this big business. And then they built their credibility before they built their likability. Everyone wants to put the cart before the horse. Everyone wants to put they want to eat the pudding before they have the proof. Yeah, the proof comes before the pudding in the real world. In a world where anyone can say anything and get instant reach, trust is the thing that is the scarcity. That is the rare commodity. And so the idea is if you want to build a really big brand, then you want to index super hard on trust. And the way that people can trust you is that you do what you said you have done. The reason Mr. Beast videos worked is because he used his videos as proof. He didn't say, I am super knowledgeable. He said, look, I did something that no one else was willing to do. His first video that went viral was him counting to 1 million or something crazy, right? And so he did something that other people were not willing to do. And so he just happened to have documented that thing. And so if you're like, well, how do I get proof? I'm so young. It's like, well, you just do epic stuff. And then people will be like, wow, he did epic stuff. This is interesting. And so it still requires epic amounts of work in order to do that. The reason that there's such a misconception about overnight success is that it's just that there's a threshold over which you are good enough that you go viral. All right. And so this is, call it like, here is the viral moment. All right. So this is our viral moment right here. The thing is that we, the person, lived this whole life. What we in the public see is this moment, what happened since. And so we have the perception of overnight success. And this is why it's so difficult for people to wrap their heads around, because they want to model what they see, not what occurred. And so we have to model what they did, not what happened. And so this fundamentally is the inputs. This is what they put in for a long period of time. What we see here is the output. This is what's visible. And so this is where it gets especially difficult for people trying to learn, is that most people get rich and then they get weird. And then what happens is people then try and copy what they do here, not what they did to get there. And so they copy the wrong stuff. They model the plateau, not the rise. So you don't get rich by flying on private jets. You get rich, then you can fly on private jets. And so a big thing that richer people do is that they will act with urgency. And I would say that this is just not even richer people. This is entrepreneurs specifically that I'm making this video for, is that they act with urgency. All right. And so you can tell in some ways how successful someone's going to be by how quickly they do things. The gap between thoughts and action. And so this is something I personally work on a lot, which is like how quickly between when I make a decision to do something does it actually occur? And you can improve your potency as a person, how powerful you are, by decreasing the gap between thoughts and action. Like if you think about the hypothetical extreme of this, the God figure, if you will, thoughts and reality are one and the same. He thinks planets and universes and they appear. And so that would be the ultimate demonstration of power, in my opinion. And so we can approximate that. We can get as close to that as we can by shrinking the time it takes between when we think and when we decide and then when we ultimately do. When you don't have any more information to collect in order to make a decision, then you make the decision. And you make the decision by eliminating alternatives. So like literally the word decide comes from decadere, which is Latin for to cut off. And so the question is, what thing are you eliminating by making the decision that you're going to make? And a really easy tactical thing is whenever you say I'm going to get this done by the end of the week, ask yourself, can I get it done by the end of the day? And that seems like a very small hack, but that increases your pace of progress by 7x. And so if you hear that, you're like, wow, 7x. It's like, yeah. And for that reason, there are people who are working 100 times faster than you. And I think that this is a really good cultural thing, which is you can just say end of day, not end of week, and not end of month, end of week. So in each of the instances, this is a 4x increase, this is a 7x increase, right? And you can even go end of day goes into end of hour. Now, this is one that Layla talks about a lot, and she's a master operator, is that she heard this from a mentor. She said, if it's a 5-minute task and you have 5 minutes, do it now. And so the amount of times where I'm like, hey, we should do this thing, and then literally in 60 seconds it's handled by Layla, like while I'm just walking around talking, just like shooting ideas out there, is baffling. And so her speed of like, that's a great idea, it's already been, delegated out. Like she doesn't keep things on her plate. And so there's this big falseness that I think is propagated by a lot of the social media world because it feels good and to get lots of shares, because it gives people permission to be lazy. It gives people permission to tell themselves that they're great just the way they are. I wholeheartedly reject that entire notion. The idea that they sell you is that you're young, you've got time. And I think that is false. Because all this does is extend how long it takes you to remember that, number one, tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Like I just looked at my newsfeed this morning and there was a guy that I knew who's my age and he just died of stomach cancer. Really sad, really nice guy, wife and 3 kids. Into fitness, really in shape, just a freak thing that happened. And so the assumption that you've got time assumes that you're going to live forever, that you're going to live to 100. And we know that that's not true. And let me put this in perspective. 3 out of 10,000 people live to 100. And so everyone has this assumption in their mind that they're like, yeah, I'm at 50, so I'm going to make it to 100. Yeah, well, you've got a 3 in 10,000 shot at doing that. Very unlikely. More realistically, you'll die at the median, which is 74 for men in the US, which means that at 37, you're actually at the halfway point, just in years. But if you adjust for the increase in speed of time, so the same reason that your kid at 5 years old thinks that something takes forever when you say it's going to happen next year, and when you're 40, something that happens next year feels like you blink your eyes and it's there, is that when you're 5, 1 year is 20% of your life. When you're 40, 1 year is 2.5% of your life. And so it very much in a real way is 9 times faster than it is for your 5-year-old. And so it's my belief that as we get older, we don't become more patient. Time just moves faster. And so if you adjust for that time speed, your midpoint isn't 37. It's closer to 21. And so this is also why, in my opinion, when you think back on your life, you have so much meat in the first 20 years, so much stuff happens, all these material life events. And it's because in that time period, it was half of your life. And then after that, everything happens real fast. And so what you have to realize is 1, tomorrow isn't guaranteed. 2, nothing is going to be easy. Just get over it. Every time you think, oh, this could look, just immediately skip to, oh, that's not true. There's something I don't know about that. Just skip to it. The faster you can train that muscle, that as soon as you have this FOMO, just slow down and realize that you don't know enough. 3, it takes time to get good. There's no one who's good at anything that was immediately good at it. And the people who are immediately good at it, I remember telling a professor, I was like, I've just naturally been good at languages. He was like, when you were a kid, did you have multiple languages in your household? And I was like, well, yeah, I'm bilingual. And he's like, what are you even talking about? Like you literally started with that. So of course languages are easier for you. And so the thing is that the people who have things that come naturally to them, they just only came because they forgot the work that generalized to the new skill. Once you realize that it takes time and repetitions to get good, then you also realize that the sooner you start, the sooner you get. And don't stop until you do. So let's assume you act with urgency, right? You've gotten that done. You've moved end of week to end of day. You've moved end of day to end of this hour. You moved end of month to end of this week, and you've massively increased the speed that you execute. Well, then you start running face forward into the fact that things are going to get really hard really fast. And so I will tell you this one is that hard is for now, not forever. And so the good thing about bad times is that they end. And the bad thing about good times is that they also end. And so whenever you're going through a good season, it's also a good reminder that this too shall pass. And so what ends up happening is that when you're in the hard time, that can give you that necessary respite. It can give you the end of the tunnel that you can look forward to. There's only 3 outcomes. You either quit, it gets easier, or you get harder. So think about that. Because no matter what, it always ends, but you only lose when you quit before you see it through. Because 2 out of the 3 outcomes get easier. Either it relents, the outside circumstance gets easier, like the hard thing moves, or you become harder, and then by extension, it no longer feels hard for you, which I'll make this real for you. Right now, think about the problems that you were stressed about 5 years ago in your business, right? Think about the things that you were dealing with, what you were stressed about. Now, think about you trying to solve those problems today. It's probably a joke to you now. You'd be like, well, yeah, obviously. It's not that those things became less hard, you became better. But here's where this gets really interesting for me. It just means that nothing is inherently hard to begin with anyways. We are just always inadequate. For me, I remember when I had 5 employees and I was like, man, it's so many people to manage. Or, I was like, where am I gonna, I have to manage cash flow. How do I do that? Or like, how am I going to get new customers? Like, how do I sell? I can't sell really expensive stuff. Like, what if someone gets upset, if I charge more, right? What if someone finds out I charged this much as though it's like something wrong? Like all of these things are just irrelevant to me now. Just so silly. Though for me at the time, they were difficult. And I can only imagine how inconsequential the problems that I deal with, growing hopefully $3 billion companies right now within the portfolio, compared to what Elon deals with having 6 multiple $100 billion companies. And I compare myself to that so I can always feel like I have a long way to go. But let me give you one thing that'll also give you a little bit of hope about these hard times, is that these hard times are also your best times, but only in reverse. And so let me explain what I mean by that. Think about the times when you were younger and you were in love and you were poor and you're like, man, those were the good old days. The thing is that when you were in that moment, it was stressful. You didn't know how you're gonna make ends meet, how you're gonna make rent, where you're gonna get food, whatever it is. You have these hard times, the hard times that you go through today, but these hard times become the good old days. And so we only see the truth when we look back. You have to go through them to get the perspective. And it's something that I try and remember on a regular basis that I'm going through the good old days. And if they're the good old days in the future, they might as well be the good old days today. So let me tell you a little bit about what it feels like throughout this entire process. Because if you are consistently growing, you are consistently in pain. That's why they're called growing pains, not growing joys. And if you have stress from growth, remember, the alternative is that you can have stress from stagnation and you can have stress from decline, which fundamentally means that hardness and stress is a fact of life. You will always have stress. You will always have problems. And the largest problem of all, the largest stressor of all, is determining that having problems is a problem, is that being stressed means there's something wrong with you. But being stressed just means you're alive. Having problems just means that you are actually doing something. I'll tell you this story that I think can drive this home. And I think this is the path to fulfillment over comfort. So imagine you talk to the creator of the universe before birth and pick the person you get to become. You say, I want to be the most courageous. The creator replies and says, well, then I will give you monsters to terrify you so that you can conquer them. Then you say, well, I want to be patient. The creator replies, well, then I will make you work harder and longer so you can learn to wait. So then you say, I want to be wise. And the creator replies, then I will give you failures that will crush your spirit so you can learn the value of judgment. You then say, sounds like a rough life. Can you give me a good life? The creator replies, just like we measure the quality of a blacksmith by the strength of his steel, I measure you by what you are at the end, not the fire and the hammer it took to make you. A good life isn't a life that's easy. A good life is a life that makes you into a good person. And that, my son, is a hard life. And so I remember when I sold Gym Launch, there was a year that I more or less took off. I had all these kind of existential crises that I was going through because all I had been doing was just working. And then I hadn't put my head up to look around and smell the roses per se. The problem that I had was that when I was smelling the roses, I was miserable. I was very sad. And the sadness for me came from the thing that I had that was most reinforcing my life was the work that I was doing. That was the thing that I enjoyed the most. And so not having that actually created a huge loss for me. And so then I had to create, like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? Right. And so for me, that was when I created the hypothesis, or at least the thesis I have for my life, was that hard work is the goal. Is that nothing left in the tank, which I got from Jesse Itzler, which I love. Emptying the tank every day is the point. Because for me, those are the days that when I look back are the days that I feel the most fulfilled on. In the moment, you feel tired, you feel exhausted, you feel like you're bored, you feel like you don't want to do another repetition, you don't want to do another 2 hours, but another 2 hours, another repetition, another edit is what is required. Not what you want, but is what is required. And if you have a little bit left in the tank, and you don't know if you have a little bit left in the tank until you empty it, until you physically can't. And so I think about that steel that we're trying to make. And the only difference is that we are both the steel and the blacksmith. And so the creator in this would just give you the fire. And either you can stand far enough away from it that it just keeps you warm, or you can go into it and you can hammer out the impurities so that you can just become better and better and better and stronger. And if you're watching this and you would like to start a business, but you're not sure where to start, I am a co-owner of School, and we just started the School Games. And right now we're giving $100,000 away in cash or a Cybertruck to the person who builds the biggest community on School in 30 days. And so School is just a community platform that helps people start businesses. And right now, 1 out of 2 people who start a paid community on School, make their first dollar online. And so you're like, okay, well, that's cool. And right now, on average, the average paid community owner makes $1,360 per month. So this is not going to be the thing that makes you, a billionaire rich, but it can help you get started, which is why I invested in the company. I spent 4 years looking for something that could make the easiest kind of starter business for people to get going, especially starting online. The reason that we have this success rate, right? The reason that we have this very high success rate is that I meet every single week and onboard new people. So every Monday I'm on a call and I onboard, right now I think it's about 300 people per call that are on there. And so I answer questions live with everyone on there. And it's a lot of times it's the same faces. So while the calls are relatively small, I'd encourage you to come on. On top of that, I have kind of like step-by-step instructions of exactly what you need to do that the best community owners have done. And so you can just model the behaviors, just do this stuff. I don't explain psychology and triggers and NLP. It's just like, do this stuff. And this is what yields this outcome, right? And then finally, we'll give you the entire platform that basically makes all the tech really easy. And so right now we've got people who are in foreign countries who don't speak English. I think there was a guy who won the games who was 15 years old. So like, I'm telling you, it's not rocket science. Like, we've really taken a lot of effort to make it as simple as humanly possible. You don't need any other software to make this work. And so if that sounds at all interesting, the best part about all of this is that you can start absolutely free. And so we have the course, we have the calls, we have the platform, and we also have the community of other people. All right. And so you can start for free, you get 14 days. You can click the link, which is right here. Oops, other way around. School.com/games. Start for free. And hopefully I'll see you on the other side. And so a big part of why this is so hard is that so few people want to go into the fire, right? And the fire could be entrepreneurship. The fire could be content creation. The fire could be starting a new product. The fire could be doing outreach and knocking on doors, or quitting your job and starting another job in a completely different industry. That's the fire. It's the thing that other people aren't willing to do. And they tell you not to do it because it helps them justify the risk that they chose not to take. It helps them feel better about the risks they aren't willing to make. I remember thinking about this at long length when I was younger, and I thought about the word exceptional, right? So buried in the word itself is the key point, which is that you cannot expect to be accepted if you want to be exceptional. To become exceptional, by definition, you have to become the exception, which means you have to be unlike other people. You have to do what they don't agree with. If they agreed with you, if everyone agrees with you, you can be sure that it's the wrong path. When I quit my job, every single person in my life told me it was a bad idea. I graduated in 3 years from Vanderbilt. I had a nice white collar consulting job. I was set up to go to grad school, to one of the Ivy Leagues. I aced my GMATs. Like, I was set up, I'd done the path. And so for me to quit and be like, I'm going to be a personal trainer for minimum wage at a gym, that was not a happy news for the vast majority of people that I knew. But the thing is that I've had those conversations multiple times in my life. When I ended up leaving the gyms and started the turnaround business, every person was like, you finally made this thing work. You finally, now we finally agree with you again. And it was right at the point where they accepted me that I was like, you know what? I think I want to do this other thing. And I'm going to sell all these gyms for basically nothing in 90 days to then start new. And they're like, but you spent so long on this. And they see sunk cost fallacy. And the thing is don't listen to the people who are closest to you. listen to the people who are closest to your goals. And so a lot of people like to think about how they have these mentors and these heroes, but the most important group is your reference group. And your reference group is who you compare yourself to. But the thing is that people think they compare themselves to their mentors and their heroes, but they don't. Who you compare yourself to is who influences your decisions. So the voices you hear, the voices you listen to when you're about to make a big move, those voices are your actual reference group. And if those voices are not close to your goal, you should not listen to them. If anything, sometimes the best advice in the world is do the opposite of whatever it is that they did to get in their life. If you don't want what they have, don't listen to what they say. Even when you're an entrepreneur. So let's fast forward a couple of years. So there was a point where I started the outbound team. So this is gonna sound super tactical, but I'm gonna zoom out for you. So we at Gym Launch we were all paid ads for the most part. I made content, I had a book, like there were things that were out there, but still 70% plus of my new customers came from paid ads. And I knew that if I wanted to sell the company, I would have to create a second acquisition channel that was very different from the primary one so that I could create more stability. So you don't have one itis, one point of failure within the business. And so I remember reading this book about how to set up outbound, and it said it will take a year. And I said, I'm really good at marketing, I'm really good at sales. It'll take me 12 weeks. And it took 12 months, like the book said. And so when I walked through that, what was interesting is it took 90 days for us to get our first sale. And the whole time I'm investing in this team, I'm investing in software, I'm investing in training and consulting to like learn how to get all this stuff going just to get our first sale. But that's not very good for the amount of time and effort we put into it. And then 3 months, after that, we started getting a couple sales trickling in, still not a lot. And I actually had almost like an intervention for my executive team that were like, hey, we think this is a shiny object. They were using my words against me. They're like, we think this is a distraction. It's not, yielding a result for us. I think we should, cut our losses and move on. And I kept thinking to myself, like, this is what hard feels like. Like we have to just keep inching our way through it because we have made sales, which means we just need to get more efficient at it. And then we did another 6 months and then we got to the point where it became 50% of revenue. But here's the thing that you don't see. And so whether you're starting a new acquisition channel like I was, you're starting paid ads, whatever, is that if I tell you in 1 year, I could double your business, right? Let's say you have to pay me $100,000, right? And in 1 year, I will double your business. Many people would probably be like, yeah, sign me up. I'll do it. Maybe I'll take a loan, but even for the 100, like if I know I'm going to double my business in a year, I would do it. Okay. But then what happens is month 1, they drop 5K and then they lose 5K. And then month 2, they lose 5K again. And then they say, ads aren't for me. Outbound's not for me. But the thing is that the way it actually feels is that you lose 5K, you lose another 5K, you lose another 5K. And then all of a sudden 1 month you make 25K. And then the next month you make 50K. And you make all of this back and some, but it happens all at once. And so there's a saying on Wall Street that I like, which is it happens slower than you expect and then faster than you can imagine. And they talk about that when it comes to market drops and market explosions. It's like we should be crashing. It hasn't adjusted yet. It happens slower than you expect and then faster than you can imagine. And so you have to be willing to forego that period of time for a long time, understanding that you just want to make progress. And so I think the thing that separates masters from beginners is that masters have more ways to win. So you can measure your expertise in anything by the ways you can measure, equaling the number of times and ways you can win. And so if you're an expert at making videos, then throughout the entire process of a really long project, you have many wins on the way. You know all the little progress markers that occur to create some big outcome. And you approximate those little progress markers for the ultimate goal at the end. When you're a beginner, you only see the output. And all you see is I'm doing stuff and nothing is happening. But you just aren't able to mark progress well. And so if you want to increase your expertise, then you need to increase the number of ways you can measure so that you can increase the number of wins you have in a given time period. And by the way, that is what makes you enjoy your work. And this is how the work itself becomes reinforcing. And so in order to develop that expertise, you have to have education. And people think that education is expensive, but the only thing more expensive than education is not being educated. And so I would say that in my life, I spent more money than I could possibly imagine simply trying to acquire skills and relationships that would make me better. To give you an idea, I think the most expensive thing that I bought for this is not including me messing stuff up and just losing tons of money, but I actually wrote a check for, was $350,000 to have a dinner with a guy who was worth $7 billion. And I got exactly what I wanted from that dinner. And it was incredibly valuable for me. And he kept saying no. I offered 100K and then 200K and 250K and then 350K. And when we offered 350K, he said, fine, I'll just have dinner with you. And he didn't ask for the money. But I think he was just seeing that I was willing to spend the $350,000 for it. And so I've spent so much money for 1 hour, 2 hours, anything to gain context. Because I heard this close, and if you've watched my channel, you've heard this before, but pick whatever number your income goal is, right? Let's say it's $1 million a year. And let's say you're currently making $100,000 a year. If you value that $1 million goal, the value of the $1 million per year, what's the price you put on that education? The value of that education is the difference between where you're at and where you want to go. And so that's why if I want to become a decabillionaire, then I should be willing to pay everything that I have in order to gain the skills, the experience, the knowledge in order to get there. And so if there's a way that you can spend $50,000 in order to learn $1 million per year skill set, then every year you don't do it, you lose $950,000 that you would have made if you had made that investment. And so the key point here is that we use poor people language when we talk about education, when we should be using investor language, because it should be an investment in an asset. And the asset just happens to be you, and you can't sell it, but you can invest in it and you can grow it. If you think about investments, you'll never say an investment is expensive. There's just a cost and a return. But if someone says there's a $100 stock or a $1,000 stock, it could be expensive relative to the return. But if the return is supposed to be good, then no one says that that amount of money itself is expensive. It's just what the cost is for the return. It is the investment. And so if you think about education in that same way, it always has to be framed in terms of what you get for it, not how much it costs. It's not about how much you make now. It's how much you're going to make and how much that's worth to you. And for me, whatever my delta is what I'm willing to pour into that without hesitation. And so for the first I lost everything at year, 6 of my entrepreneurial journey. And I put all of the extra money that I had right back into learning more stuff. And so even though I made profit, my biggest expense was me, but it wasn't on my living and my lifestyle. It was on my education and my network and my surroundings and the skills I wanted to learn, the courses, the workshops, the seminars, the coaching programs, all the things that I did. I'm a product of that world, despite the fact that I think that world overall has a lot of shitty people. I still learned a lot. And you can learn just as much by learning what not to do and saying, I will never do that, or treat someone the way that person treated me. Because the best students never come out negative. So really, think that I have always been the top performer in every single program, coaching, whatever I have ever done. And so the process that I use is, number one, do everything they tell you to the T the first time. Then take what works and toss the rest. You can learn something from everyone, but only take in that which makes you stronger, which is a quote that I have from Harry Potter, the Sword of Gryffindor. But I love it because it was enchanted to have this spell that it would only take in things that made it stronger. So it took in the basilisk venom, which allowed it to kill, the Horcruxes later on. But I like to see myself as that sword, is that I continue to invest, I continue to put things into the steel, but I only take in that which makes me stronger. So a lot of people have these negative experiences with coaches, consultants, vendors, whatever. And I just like to think to myself, in what way will this make me better? And so by instead asking that question rather than enumerating the many things they could have done better or the things they did wrong, simply saying there is something that I can learn from this. And there is something in this experience that will make me stronger. And that frame may have been one of the most valuable frames that I've had, because I, like you, have spent plenty of money on things that have, quote, not worked. But I still learned enough from them, and oftentimes what not to do, that allowed me to then see what to do. But before I ever did that, I had to do the first 3 steps of that, which was do everything they said to the T the first time. And if for whatever reason it did not work, I would then use my other skills to patch the difference so that I could find a way to make it work. And by the way, if they have a success story, which they usually do because that's how they sold you, is that you find that person and figure out what they are doing that is lacking in the education that the person who's teaching taught. Fundamentally, if you ever buy something where there is somebody who has been successful, then it means there are activities that yield success. And the discrepancy, I'm going to show this to you visually because I think it's important. So let's say there's a bridge, right? And you've got, here's money and here's you, okay? So you've got this path that someone shows you how to do. So you paid money and they give you these little bricks here, right? They give you these little bricks that you paid money for. And maybe these bricks, you had to pay different vendors different amounts of money for each one of these bricks, but you still haven't made money yet. The thing is that there's a gap here. And the reason that some people are successful with some people's programs or implementations and other people aren't is because that the people who already bought that brick from somebody else before that, that brick isn't missing. And so if you see the education you have as these bricks on the road, then you wouldn't say that the foundation of a house is in some way a ripoff. You would just say it's not a complete house. Now, if they sold you the expectation that you would have a house, sure, you could be upset by them, but they still helped you build a foundation. And so it's the same people who get upset saying, oh, I learned arithmetic from Mrs. Glass, but then when I found Mr. Hardwick and he taught me calculus, she only taught me arithmetic. She's a moron. You wouldn't say that. But for some reason, people talk about the basics of business the same way when they become more advanced. If someone taught you how to do outbound and do warm outreach so that you could sell your first customers, and someone else later teaches you how to run ads, well, you probably learned how to work the leads from the ads that work for you because you learned how to do outbound. You probably learned how to sell because you learned how to sell strangers. And so when you did the ads, it worked for you. And then somebody else who did that same exact implementation didn't have the bricks that you had, and they never got the dollars that came across. And so whenever something doesn't work, it doesn't make you any better by saying it's their fault. And fault also only matters in the eyes of the law, which you're not going to sue anybody anyway. So who gives a shit? The only thing that matters is whether the outcome happens or not, which is under your control, because it means that you simply have a discrepancy between where you are and where you want to go. And so a lot of people would then say, sure, Alex, it's easy for you to say you're a white guy. You're right. Cool. So just don't watch the video and move on. But for everybody else, you've got connections, you've got money, you've got looks, you've got intellect or intelligence. These are all great, but you can beat all of these. You can beat somebody who has all four if you have one thing, which is the desire to improve. The insatiable desire to improve. No matter where you start, if you have this, it's hard to beat someone who improves every second of every day without stopping, without giving up. And so I have met people who have connections, money, looks, and intelligence. And they do not people who have an insatiable desire to improve, who do not stop. And so if you think about it like this, if life were a race where at the end you die, so got to finish first, right? There are people who may start at different parts of that race. But what is not measured is the speed that you can move. And so I don't know if you've seen these clips that have gone viral in the NFL where they have like one of their wide receivers start like 20 yards behind a fan and they have to race the length of the football field. And then the wide receiver will usually catch up, like talk to them and then just speed right past them. And so it's far less about where you start, because that's where a lot of losers will define themselves. They'll define themselves by what happened to them rather than what they made happen. And somebody else may be here, but it only matters if you think that there's fairness. But I don't believe fairness is something that exists in the universe. And so I don't hold it as an ideal that I proclaim must exist. But there is simply a starting point in a rate of progress. And the starting point you can't control, but the rate of progress you can. And so control what you can control. If education is a change in behavior, that's what you do. If you become educated, you do something different after you learn something. Then intelligence is rate of learning, which means that you can, in a very real way, influence. It's the rate of learning, the speed of learning. You can influence how quickly you move along this race independent of where you start. And you'll also note that the person here has no influence on what this person does. These two people are independent nodes. The only reason that this person gets upset is that they think it's not fair. And if you just eliminate fairness from your vocabulary and think only in terms of what do I need to do, then it eliminates a lot of the distraction that keeps you poor. So if you recall from the very beginning, lazy people get distracted. They focus on distraction. And one of the biggest distractions is it's not fair. It's not fair. I shouldn't have to. I should get. I should, it should, things shouldn't. It's all shoulds. And I will tell you that should, in my worldview, should not exist. Because should creates expectations of an uncaring universe. It says that you demand something, and I promise you that the universe will win. And so all you have to do is watch like baby seals just get immediately eaten by orcas after like a mother is laying there on the ice to be like, wow, life isn't fair. I'm sure that seal could be like, it's not fair that my babies were literally eaten in front of me. Tough, right? Tough. They have mammal brains. We can see that they got some feelings, right? And so if we go back to the sword of Gryffindor, does demanding that it should be fair make you stronger? Does saying that that person started further ahead of you in any way benefit you? No. because your actions are entirely independent from them. And so the only thing that does is actually delay your speed of taking action. It makes you dumber, because if we define intelligence by rate of learning, then it means it takes you longer to learn. It makes you stupid. And I think that that's why people stay here for a very long time. And many of them never leave. So what are the things that bad entrepreneurs talk about with good entrepreneurs? Is one of the excuses they'll make is that they will make preference excuses. They will make trade-off excuses. They will say, this is not worth the price, in which case, fine, but don't also want the thing. So for example, privacy is the price of fame. Loneliness is the price of ambition. Pleasure is the price of discipline. Novelty is the price of loyalty. Discretion is the price of trust. And so many people want the benefits of these traits, but can't afford the cost or the price. They're not willing to be discreet, but they want someone to trust them. They can't hold someone's secrets. They want somebody to be loyal to them at home, but then they want the thrill of the new relationship. They want the benefits of discipline, of consistency, but they can't trade the pleasure in the moment. They want ambition, but they're not willing to pay the price of being lonely, of being the exception. They want fame, but then all of a sudden they are startled when they realize that they have no privacy. And so each of these things are trade-offs. And if you're not willing to make the trade, fine, but don't bitch about it. And I think part of it is that we have a hard time understanding to what degree. And so each of these ideals are not binary. It's not discretion, it's how much discretion you have. It's not novelty, it's how much novelty. It's not pleasure, it's how much pleasure. It's not loneliness, it's how lonely. And it's not hard work, it's how hard do you have to work and how long do you have to work. And so most people, and I think this is where a lot of the complaints come, is that they believe they're doing 10 out of 10 work, right? They're like, this is 10 out of 10 hard for me right now. But they're actually only doing 1/10 of the amount of work that it takes to get to this goal. And so they might be doing a 10 out of 10 work for a 100K goal, but they're doing a 1 out of 10 work for a $1 million goal. And I think a lot of that work comes down to being able to accurately assess reality and see what your actual discrepancies are and realize how much work you really have to do in order to get good at every one of those discrepancies. Because most outcomes don't occur until you've met all of the conditions, like a pipeline. All right, so let's say you've got this pipeline here and you've got these valves. These are the valves, you've got this water that's coming here, and let's say once you get all the way through, the water comes out the other side. These valves have to open. You have to open this thing, open each of these valves, and let's say you've checked off 3 of the 4 boxes. The water's still gonna be stuck here. You're still not gonna get the water through. And so the thing is that as much as you work, and you're like, but I did that, and I did that, and that didn't work, and that didn't work. It may have worked, it just might not have met every condition to get the outcome. And so if you think about life and outcomes that way, it gets a lot easier because it stops being emotional. You can simply say, there's a condition that I haven't met, and I have to figure out what that condition is, rather than proclaiming that the universe isn't fair or that you started further back and that's why your effort hasn't resulted in it. Maybe this person only has to meet 3 of these and you have to meet 4. Okay, well then I guess that means that you're going to be better than them. Why is that a bad thing? It means that you're going to develop more skills to achieve the same goal. Great. If the end of this life is that you are the steel, you are the thing that gets created, then you can't resent the hammer and the fire that makes you. Because you can't wish for strong character and an easy life. Because the price of each is the other. So either people aren't succeeding because they don't understand that they have to make a trade that they're not willing to make, or the trade that they're currently making isn't sufficient. So they either think that they deserve to get the Nike shoes just for being who they are and think it's not fair and think that the store owner should just give them the Nike shoes. And look, all you have to do is look at the news. There's plenty of people who think that way and they go and try and take it, right? But that makes them a thief. That makes them significantly worse. It actually does more harm to them, in my opinion. But there are people who believe that. That's the worst, that's the lowest level. The next level above that is people who say, no, I'm willing to pay for the Nikes, but I'll pay 30. It's like, yeah, but they're 300. That's the price. It's like, yeah, but I'll pay 30. They understand the extent of the trade-off. And then they complain that their $30 isn't good enough. It shouldn't be so expensive. It is what it is. And so there's a saying that Layla and I say a lot internally. I'm like, it takes what it takes. And so if we want this thing, what often has to happen is you have to keep bidding. It's much more like an auction of a trade-off, because the real world, level 3, is that you see the Nikes and then you bid 30, and then you realize it's not enough. And rather than moan or put your thing down and walk away, you're like, 50? And you're like, 100? You're like, God. And so that is the pain, is being able to consistently reset the expectations and bid again and again and again until eventually you make it all the way through and you bid $300. You do get your Nikes. And then all of a sudden everyone says, must be nice to be born so naturally good. All you have to do, by the way, is watch some of my very first content pieces. And you think my very first content pieces are the podcasts that I made. The very first content pieces that I made for my gyms 13 years ago. And so it's like, man, you're so naturally good on camera. Watch those videos. Tell me if you think the same way. I had to take shots before the videos because I was so nervous about sounding stupid. And the fourth version, I would say like the highest version of this. So I'll break this down. So the 0 level of trade-offs is should. You just say you should get it for nothing. The next level is too much. So you say it's $30, but it's actually 300, and you say it should. The next level is bidding. So you bid. So you say 30, 50, 100, and you find out that you're insufficient and you keep going up. The final is source, which is where you determine the price. And this is often, in my opinion, where you create your reality. So it's continuing to hammer away at content, continuing to write drafts of the book before anyone else has seen it, because you are the one that holds a standard higher than everyone else's. Because no longer do you accept the approval of others as your litmus test. The market, for sure, in the beginning will tell you whether you're good or not. But Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, right? They would have asked for faster horses, not cars. Is that they demand more from themselves than anyone else does. And by setting that standard here, where everyone else is here, by actually meeting the standards of the market, you actually lower your own. And so this is where your standards become source. And this is where you get into rarefied air. And this is what the quote, rich guys, if you will, when we talk behind closed doors about what people don't understand, it's about holding the standard. And in my opinion, the person who should make the decision in every organization is the person who has the highest standards, not the person who's most senior, not the person who has the most shares. It's the person who has the highest standards for whatever it is. Our marketing should be at this level. If the owner thinks it's less, then that person should be the person who's running marketing. If somebody else thinks the product needs to be this good and someone else thinks it to be less, that person should be in charge, whether it's their first day or the 1,000th day. The person who has the highest standards is the one who should be making the decision. They should become source. And so when you get to that level, the only person you're making trade-offs with is yourself. You're the one who's determining, is this good enough for me to put my name on? Rather than, is this good enough for them to say it's good? And for example, J.R.R. Tolkien worked on The Hobbit for a decade, and he didn't even submit the draft. One of his friends saw that he'd been working on it for a decade and submitted it, grabbed it from his desk and submitted it for him to a publisher. And then it obviously became The Hobbit, and everything came after that. And so his standards were so high that he still didn't even think it was ready, but it was still so good that they ended up releasing it. Now, many of you think that you are J.R.R. Tolkien, but most of you are not. It's actually just very bad. And so once you realize how high your standards really have to be in order to be excellent, what you then have this daunting realization is that you can only do 2 to 4 things in your whole life because of how long it really takes to get to there. And so it's like, I want to be the best author in the world. That's not a desire of mine, to be clear. But if I wanted to be the best author in the world, then I know that that's going to take at least a decade of actually working hard every single day to get better. And believing that for me, because I'm special, I should somehow be able to be, my first book is an overnight success, and that is the thing that chains you to mediocrity. It's believing that it should be a different way rather than accepting reality as it is and then changing your actions as a consequence. And so this is also why lazy people distract themselves. Because distraction makes you believe the lie that you can try 100 things and then figure out which one works. When the reality, any of them can work, but none of them will work unless you pick one to work on. And then that is you making it work. The vast majority of things with enough iteration can become success. It's just that people underestimate how many iterations they need to have. It's 19 drafts, not 2. It's 500 minutes of editing to make the video, not 50. It's making 1,000 phone calls every week for 2 years, not 2 months. And so most of the times It's just that our level of understanding, it's here. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. A lot of people get stuck here. They say, I should be better. This should be easier. I've already paid a little bit. I said I was willing to pay 30. The Nike store owner won't give me the shoes. And then you continue, you basically are the same as this person. You just have a price attached to it. I should, it should be, I deserve, I am worth. It takes what it takes. It costs what it costs. You got to be willing to make the trade. And if you're not willing to make the trade, fine, just don't complain. And so if you want to become the exception, you want to make those trade-offs, you're willing to invest in skills and invest your time and do the repetitions and gain leverage to increase your output, and are willing to move things from monthly to weekly, weekly to daily, daily to hourly, and continue to pull forward your reality on a faster and faster pace, then I think you'll love this video about how to get ahead of the 99% of people.